we will be beginning this event with a small Veda Ghosha by Dr. Jagannath Acharya from Tara Prakashana. I request Dr. Jagannath Acharya to kindly deliver the Veda Ghosha.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Gananaan Tva Ganapatigum Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anashrinvannotibhis Siddhasadanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswate Vajebhirvajinivati Dhinama Vitravat Ano Divo Brahata Parvatada Saraswati Yajatagantu Yagyam Vagdevi Namaha Rishabhamma Samananam Sapatnanam Vishasahim Hantaram Shatrunang Kridhivirajam Gopatingava Ahamaspi Sapattahendra Ivarishto Akshataha Adhas Sapatta Me Padorime Sarve Abhishtitaha Atraiva Vupi Nakyam Ubhe Artni Yivajjaya Vachaspade Nishedhe Manyatha Madadharam Vadan Abhibhurahagamam Vishwakarmena Dhamna Avaschitamavo Vratamavoham Samitindade Yogakshemam Va Adayaham Bhuyasamuttama Avo Murdhanamakrami Adaspadam Navadvata Manduka Manduka Avudakadiva Hrihi.
Good evening, esteemed guests. It's our honor today to have our guests of honor today. I would like to first welcome Shri Tejasvi Surya, Honorable Member of Parliament. Shri Tejasvi Surya has many accomplishments to his credit, as he has been serving as the Member of South for Bangalore South, the Member of Parliament. Some of them include the citizen initiatives such as Sansad Dwani, where that's a very progressive citizen platform where people can voice issues. So that has been something which is quite revolutionary. He's brought in with his team. He's introduced this program called BEST, the Bangalore Social and Education Transformation, to help underprivileged schools and schools which less infrastructure be able to educate and provide education infrastructure. Again, a very progressive initiative. He's helped groom leaders through a LEAD program, which is very creditable with young leaders. And last but not least, crisis management. We all saw how we reacted during COVID, and we really thank Shri Surya and his team for the wonderful series. Next, I would like to welcome Shri Mohandas Pai and his Padma Shri, very well, as we know him as former CFO of Infosys. He was also had left his CFO position to serve as head of human resources, head of human development, to give back to grooming young leaders at Infosys and globally. He was Akshay Patra, one of the founding members, served for 20 years and helped build that institution to what it is today, which I think all of us should feel proud of. He is the chairman of the Manipal Global Education, which is again the world's biggest, India's biggest education services. More than 400,000 students. It's just mind-boggling, that number, across several continents, several nations, something to be proud of as a very, very large footprint globally. So it's just a privilege to have you here. Lastly, I would like to welcome among our guests Srimati Shefali Vaidya. So Srimati Shefali Vaidya again has made a very distinguished contribution in a different area. She has been a prolific author, publisher, columnist, blogger, influencer, among many other facets of her personality. She has more than 700,000 followers on social media, which is no mean accomplishment, which is a testament to her ability to draw the youngsters to this platform on key issues, social and political issues. So we thank you, Srimati Vaidya, for that type of contribution in leadership on the digital platform, bringing a lot of youngsters, and she has never been afraid to voice seemingly sometimes even unpopular issues, never afraid to call a spade, and we really thank you for that voice of advocacy. Next, I would like to welcome, we would all welcome Sri Divakar Ghosh, Rupa Publishers, who has been the editor of this book and has graced us with his presence here. We really thank him for all his contributions in bringing it to this stage, and we wouldn't be here without his contribution, so thank you very much. Next, we would like to welcome all the distinguished Vice Chancellors out here who have taken the time to attend our event, and we really thank all of you out here, and thank you for making the time to be here. We welcome the press who has made it and taken time to attend our event. And last but not least, we would like to welcome all of you for making the time today evening to attend and grace this function. Once again, thanks to all of you for making this event.
I now call upon Sri Divakar Ghosh from Rupa Publications to introduce the book and also share a few words as to the background of why he chose to publish this book. Please, sir.
Thank you so much.
Namaskar to everyone. Sadhar Pranam to Guruji, Acharya P.R. Mukund. We are absolutely delighted. We are completely overjoyed at having published this book. A book that is more relevant now than ever before. In times when our understanding, the lens that we put on, like it was just mentioned, success, on how we understand life, that lens has been unfortunately colored in a way that is not very indigenous to us. That is not Sanatan. That's a color that has been acquired over the ages through the times that we have lived through the alien cultures that have unfortunately invaded us, plundered us, and also made us, in terms of mindset, very different than what it began. What began was Sanatan. And that is, I think, the crux of this book, is to bring us back to that concept of that Sanatan Dharma, that Sanatan concepts that we need to imbibe in everyday life. You know, the first time I met Professor, I remember it was at a hotel in Delhi. And I'm very skeptical, I was very skeptical when I was meeting him. I think it was sometime in the winter. So first 10 minutes, I was questioning him. I never realized that it was his way of bringing me into the understanding and the way he's essentially an engineer, right? So that scientific bent of mind, the way he explained things to me, and I think which we have captured in the descriptor of the book, he brings that infinite knowledge that is present in the universe. That is what a guru does for you. That infinite knowledge of the universe then gets funneled through him into us. He brings it to a level where we can understand and absorb that information. Because those concepts are not easy to understand. It has to be understood by each person his own way. That's what he did. That's what he did for me. That's when I told him, sir, you have to write. You have to write a book. we developed this concept, and it went through many iterations. And I'm sorry, in the initial bits, there were iterations we completely kind of set aside, saying that is not going to work. I apologize for that. But now I think what we have, forget every leadership, every self-motivational book, inspirational book. This is what you should read. This is what will put you on the path to self-actualization, realization, to understanding what is you. So I'll just notes which I've made, I think, which are important to share. I think this book is nothing but a mission. It's a mission. It's a mission to reconnect ourselves with who we were and what we should be going forward. It's an affirmation. It's an affirmation of us as a people. He told me one very important thing at that meeting. He said, India used to be the spiritual center of the universe. The spiritual center of the universe, that fulcrum has shifted away. I think what you are doing, sir, and with hopefully many other books, is to build that fulcrum back. That spiritual center of the universe has to come back and recognize that it was always India. Bharat, sorry. India is again a term, and again, like you have said in the book, Hindu is not a term which is derived from the scriptures or anything. It is the Sanatan Dharma. It is the Sanatan way of life. It is the Sanatan culture which needs to prevail. And I think that is the message of the book. And that if people were to understand that, I think that mindset shift will happen, and India will slowly get back to that greatest position in earth. We change our minds. We change the way we work. We change the way we think. Just a little while ago, I was telling Mr. Pai, and I was telling him, sir, India needs a book on corporate dharma. Because that is something which I think needs to be understood. Krishna told Arjun that you have to defeat the enemy, you have to do this. So when you are in the corporate world as well, there are certain things which you have to do. That the moral compass and the integrity compass, the certain values which need to remain. And that is where I think India will move into that next orbit of getting into that corporate space where I think we can do anything that the world has done. I think, sir, what you are doing now with this book, and hopefully in the books to come, is wonderful. And thank you, Mr. Pai. Thank you, Ms. Vaidya. And thank you, Tejasvi, for being here, for encouraging us with your presence, and also to all of you to being part of this journey, part of this mission which is going to start today. And hopefully this will catch momentum as we go along. Thank you so much.
I request all the guests to kindly release the book. Thank you so much for releasing this book. Any picture is incomplete without understanding the context of why it is made. So it is time for us to hear from the author himself about the context and the background of why this book was written and what exactly is the message out of it. I now invite Professor P.R. Mukund to kindly address the gathering.
So, like I was saying, I want to thank all the nice things that Dibakar Ghosh said. It's been a very interesting experience for me because I've been in academia for about 30 odd years, 35 years, and in industry before that for a number of years. I'm an engineer by training and profession. So all my writing has been technical mostly. There's been some small booklets and all that I'd written related to spirituality, but this is the first time I actually went through the process of actually publishing a book, and it's been a very interesting experience. Thank you, Dibakar, for encouraging me and being there all the time. I also want to thank all these three people, because I know, well, all of you know how busy they are, and in spite of that, as soon as we requested them, all three of them immediately agreed, and so thank you so much for being here today. So regarding the book itself, why did I write it? Well, the thing is that there are so many hundreds of thousands of books out there, right? So there's no point in just adding one more to that large list, except for one thing. When I was looking back at my own path, I grew up right here, by the way, half a kilometer from here, school and college, another half a kilometer this way, at National High School, National College. And coming from that background, to getting to a point where in the engineering domain, I have supervised the research of more than 80 graduate students and supervised a lot of projects and so on. So when I started looking back at that journey, my biggest question to me was, how did this happen? Because I'm as surprised as some of my friends are at what has happened to me, right? So when I started contemplating on that about 30 years ago, roughly, I was very fortunate to come across my guru, Dr. Bananja Govindacharya. He was my guru. He passed away recently, about a year and a half ago. And so that brought in a brand new perspective. So when you talk about success in general, the biggest problem I had in writing this book, more than anything else, is the fact that it had to be written in English. Because every language is an external manifestation of a culture and a way of thought, right? So the words that you have available to express anything, some of the things that he's talking about Sanatana Dharma, there are no equivalent words at all in English, right? So there's a bandwidth limitation to start with. So that was my biggest struggle, actually, more than anything else. It was not the ideas, but to express it in English is very hard. Yet, if you look at, Dibakar sort of talked about that a little bit, but if you look at our education system in this country and what is happening today, I come across, many, many hundreds of students, graduate students coming from India. When I talked to them, I was really surprised that many of them really did not know any regional language at all. Like, even though they claim that their mother tongue is, you say, what's your mother tongue? They'll say, whatever it is, right? But they hardly know, they've not read any literature, they have no clue at all. And when you talk about success for these people, their definition of success is what is defined in an alien culture and brought over here. So I start thinking about that, and the question is this, right? When we look at our own way, our own perspective on what you may call success. I don't want to use that word. I would like to use the word sadhana, right? Because this sharira, according to our way of thought, we call it sadhana sharira, right? So if you don't do sadhana, how is it success? To start with, right? Because the sharira is meant for sadhana. Then you start asking yourself, okay, fine, what does that mean? What is sadhana? What exactly does that mean? And if you go one step further and look at our way of looking at this sadhana, I always like to use the analogy that in life, in a given span of time, the question is, how far can you go? And the symbol that we use is chakra, a wheel. Why does anybody use a wheel anyway, right? A wheel is used because in a given amount of time, with a given amount of energy, you can go farther. Otherwise, why will you use the, instead of walking, you're riding a bicycle or something, you can go farther, right? So that wheel, if you look at that wheel, it has a few important components to that. Of course, the axle has to be there, the spokes have to be there, and the rim has to be there, right? So when you look at the spokes that are connecting the axle to the outer perimeter, if I look at my life, what are all the different things in my own life that is connected to me at the center It cannot be just professional success. It cannot be just money, because all of those things are what is coming from society to me. The question is, what is going from me to society? So according to our own thought process, there are 4 different kinds of rewards we can get, right? And those 4 things, I think most of us know. There is artha, there is dharma on one side, but there's also moksha and kama on the other side, right? These 4 things are represented symbolically by shankha for artha, and then chakra for dharma. So these 2 things, dharma and artha, those have to be in balance to start with for me to claim that I'm going to do anything in life. So if I just focus on acquiring things, with the other side being empty, the dharma side not being there, then how can that be a balanced life to start with? So when we look at all the different aspects of my life, it could be something personal, it could be my family life, for example, it could be my health, it could be the amount of money I have, the amount of publications I have, whatever it is, right? All of those things, the question is this, all of those things, just like in a wheel, it has to be connected to one underlying principle that drives everything. In my own field of electronics, I'm a chip designer. So if you look at the first chip that I designed, the transistor size was 5 microns. A micron is 1 millionth of a meter, right? The last project I did 2-3 years ago had 11 nanometers transistor. So these things keep changing, constantly keep changing. That is not sanatana. So the question is, what is it that is constant? One constant principle in my life that defines every single thing I do. Or is there such a thing? If there is no such principle, then it's like a wheel without an axle, right? So I need to have that one guiding principle which remains constant, and that constant principle, if it also has been a constant in humankind, 5,000 years ago and 5,000 years from, that's what we call Sanatana Dharma, right? So if it has to apply to every single human being, it always did and it will always will. The question, what is that? And the only thing that we can say is that is what we refer to as sadhana, right? So for us to do that, whatever it might be, and here are some very good examples of people who have done sadhana in many different directions. For us to actually do that in a lifetime, is there any process for that, or is it just random? Like if we just work hard, will that happen? And according to our own way of thought, actually there is a ten-prong way of doing this, starting with jnana. I don't want to say knowledge, because that is again a very bad translation. Knowledge is not jnana. Jnana is something much more than that. We just lit a lamp there, right? Right now we all went and lit a lamp. And that is supposed to represent jnana. That's why we do that. And when we light that lamp, when we say things like tamasoma, jyotirgamaya and all those things, what exactly is that? So when you look at that lamp, and why do we use that thing as a symbol of jnana? Why? Because if you look at that lamp, right, it has multiple components in that. There's a philosophical question when that light is burning, is it the wick that is burning or is it the oil that is burning? The answer is both. They're both burning. But you notice that the wick, if the wick happens to be not extending outside that container, there is no light. Similarly, if what I do doesn't stick outside of me into society, there is no jnana, there is no sadhana, there is nothing. If it's all me and more me, it doesn't do anything. So of course, we have a finite length of time in which we can do that, all of us. So I'm not going to have a sadhana sharira forever. We have a finite amount of time. The question is that finite amount of time, just like that lamp burns for a while, as long as that wick is there, and the oil has to be there too. So what is it? What is the wick and what is the oil? The wick is the length of time that the length of time that I have this sadhana sharira. But more importantly, the oil, it has to be soaked in that, and that oil is the jnana, because without jnana, there is no karma. So this book basically is a very feeble attempt, and I say feeble because it's in English. And it's all the words in English I claim are meaning-wise a subset of actually the root word in Sanskrita. Just like if you take jnana and knowledge, jnana is a superset of knowledge. Knowledge is just a subset of jnana, right? So it's kind of hard, but because of the fact that how many people would pick up books in Sanskrit and read, how many people would, even Kannada books, for example, forget about Sanskrit, even in Kannada or Marathi or Konkani, whatever language you may, whatever your mother tongue might be. Unfortunately today, whether we like it or not, this is the means to reach a lot of young people. My demographic, my target, by the way, is people in, like, say, 20 to 30, 35. That's my target demographic. So, again, I just want to thank all of you, Tejasvi, Shefali, and Mr. Pai, for being here. And so I'll stop there, and I don't know where Sumak is. I'll let him continue.
My dear friends, we have a very interesting panel on the stage with us here today. We can't have a better platform than this. In the context of the book, where Professor Mukund, discusses about the 10 gunas that all of us need to have, and which basically goes on to define, or rather, as I said, redefine success. I'd like to open up the discussion by requesting all our esteemed guests to have an opening remark, starting with Tejasvi ji, and then we can have a right, as it's a free-flowing discussion, so please jump in. So, Shri Mohandas Pai ji.
Hello.
Hello.
Folks, it's good to be here to discuss this very wonderful book. I just want to place a context to understand why this book is important to all of us. Sanatana Dharma came up in the economy of surpluses. If you look at old civilization, this civilization was a rich civilization because we were an economy of surpluses, being an economy where there was abundant water in Bharatavarsha. From the Sutlej and the Indus and the Saraswati right up to the Ganga and the Kaveri, this is a land of lot of water. And with this water, there is good agricultural growth, there is prosperity, and there is a lot of wealth that is created. And there was no scarcity. So when you have an old culture like this, the people living in this culture start thinking about the finer aspects of life because they don't have to think of survival. And when you don't have to think of survival, you try to find the reason for your existence. Because you are culturally rich, economically rich, socially rich, you try to say, why is it that mortality is the end result for every human being? When you've got so much, then they ask the question, what is the purpose of life? Why do we live and what are we supposed to achieve? Knowing that the day you're born, one day you're going to go. And there's only one life. Of course, you have rebirth and all that. None of us have been born again to understand what we are. That's what we believe. And that is the most profound question that human civilization had to address ever in human history. And our forefathers addressed that and found a way and a solution. And the solution was very clear. They said here, like he writes in the book, that Jiva, we have to live a life, Jivan, to find Moksha. So the objective of life is to find Moksha. And the objective of life is not to conquer others, is not to kill others, is to find Moksha, find our own way to the Moksha. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita addresses Arjuna and tells him the whole reason for his existence and how to fulfill his responsibility or his dharma and to live for dharma. Why? Because dharma is what keeps a good society together. When adharma comes, you have to fight against adharma, like our young MP is doing all the days when he goes across the country and gives his great lectures. He's fighting adharma. because he wants to bring about dharma in this country. Now, it's a very profound thing because it's only dharma that allows every human being to realize their potential. And this is what we discuss. But this had its repercussions because when we were attacked by other cultures, we fought those people on our own rules. And many times we lost. There's a story about Alexander when he came here to fight, came here to conquer this country. He fought against Purushottama and he lost the battle because of some strategic things. And then when Purushottama was brought before him, Alexander asked him, how should I treat you? Purushottama said, treat me like a king. I've been defeated, treat me like a king. Because that was the dharma. You don't kill your enemy, you treat him like a king. Go fast forward in a battle where Akbar fought when he was 13 years with Hemachandra called Hemu. Hemu was injured in the eye and so he lost the battle. Otherwise, he was in a superior force because the arrow, stray arrow, went and hurt him and he was incapacitated. Then they captured him, bound him, brought him before Akbar. And this brave young Akbar at 13 years took his sword and cut off his neck. Does it require bravery to cut the neck of a person, a human being who is bound up and cannot fight back? That's the kind of bravery those people had because they came from a culture of survival, a culture of want, a culture of having nothing, a desert culture. And for them, killing others, taking from everything without breaking all the rules and killing others was the way they fought. And I think this is a very important message for us to understand why we have become what we are. So this economy of surpluses, this economy of a rich culture, an economy which found a country, a civilization found the reason for human existence, and this is a country where there were 13 universities where people from all over the world came here to get knowledge and to understand in various areas of science and all other areas, became a very poor country because of his inability to fight successive invasions by forces from outside who played by a different rule. So if you go to the Mahabharata, when the Yuddha was found, the rules were very different. In the evening, there was a bugle and they all went away, right? You never killed anybody who was down. And you fought by a set of rules. Those rules were not there with an alien culture and we were conquered and we became very, very poor. So this country was impoverished. And as it impoverished, we lost our attachment to our culture and to what we are as a rich civilization. Because the poor, impoverished people will always work for survival. We had a slavish mentality, and our great historians from Delhi started, praising the Mughals to say Indian history is all about Mughals, is all about foreigners conquering us. But we survived. We survived. And now this country is coming up. And this country is becoming wealthy. And as we become wealthy, we have to rediscover our roots. Find out what made us what we are. Invest in our education. Invest in knowledge creation. And much of the knowledge that is there was taught by our forefathers who taught us the important thing. Yes, you can become powerful. What is the next step for Prime Minister Modi after his 1-2 election, win the next election? But you see the transition in the man. He's becoming more and more saintly, he's becoming more and more of a statesman, and he's looking at things that he has to do because he understands that is his karma, that is his ultimate goal, to get moksha. And his moksha is towards service to the people of this country. And that is what our leaders thought. And that is what our culture is. Our culture is not the conquest of nature. Our culture is not the killing of people. Our culture is not the mere accumulation of wealth. Because those things the people do. And today we have got climate change and we got a big problem because the Western civilization is based upon the conquest of nature, the mastery of nature, whether our civilization is based upon living in harmony of nature. That is why we worship the elements, we worship the forest, we worship the animals, because all of us are creatures of nature and God has made us all. And in our culture, we have the greatest gift of all, which you must keep as a country and a civilization. And that was told by Krishna to Arjuna at the end of the Gita Upadesha. And what is that? Krishna tells Arjuna in the end, oh Arjuna, I've told you everything that I wanted to know, but it's up to you to accept or not to accept. It's up to you to decide for yourself. That means we have the freedom to decide what we want, which other cultures don't have the freedom because they're based on dogma. They say they got one God, one way, and only they will go to heaven, the rest of us will not go to heaven. I mean, it's incredible how people can think of that because the mind is constrained, the thought is constrained, and you become slaves of a defeatist ideology and a dogma, whereas Krishna told Arjuna, you don't have to accept whatever I say, you find out for yourself. And Krishna says, I am there waiting for all of you, find your own way to reach me. This is true liberty. true thought. And in this philosophy, all of us have to find a way. In the Mahabharata, in the end, the Pandavas go up in the Himalayas to meet their maker. Each one falls one by one. Then Yudhishthira wonders, why is he last left? And there's a story. And the story is like this. All of us are born. In our life, we have siblings, we have family, parents, we have, spouses, we have children. But at the end of the day, we have to go all alone to meet our maker. Because we have to go all alone. We are born alone, we go alone. And during this time, we have our relationships, we live a rich life, what is called Jivan. Right? And Jivan. And then Jiva is you. And what is the end? Is Moksha. And how can Moksha come? Moksha can come by living a life of Dharma. Now, why am I saying all this? Because in this book, Professor Mukund has given us the 10 Gunas are required. Because attaining Moksha just cannot happen by saying, I want to attain Moksha. There is a technology, there is a process, there are mindsets, there are things to do to attain that, and you have to live this life in stages. And that is what he has done. And if you read this book, you find that Professor Mukund, Mukund ಅವರು ಒಂದ್ಸಲಿ ಸೇಪೆಕಾಯಿ ಮರದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಬಂತು. ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಯಾವಾಗ? ಅವರ ವಯಸ್ಸು 5 ವರ್ಷ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅವರು 6 ವರ್ಷ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ಹೋದರು, ಕಾಲೇಜ್ಗೆ ಹೋದರು, NCC ಹೋದರು, ಪೈಲಟ್ ಆಗೋಕ್ಕೆ ನೋಡಿದ್ರು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಪೈಲಟ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅಮೇರಿಕಾಗೆ ಹೋದರು, ದುಡ್ಡಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಕಾಲೇಜಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಓದಿದರು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು PhD ಗೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅವರು ಭಾಳ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ರು. ಆದರೆ ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೇನೋ ಒಂದು ಶೂನ್ಯ ಇತ್ತು, ಎಂಪ್ಟಿನೆಸ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಗೋವಿಂದಾಚಾರ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಗುರು ಸಿಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅವರು ಜರ್ನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರಿಗೂ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಬಂತು ಗುರುವಿಂದ. 5 ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಜ್ಞಾನ ಬಂತು ಎಲ್ಲ ಮರ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಆಮೇಲೆ 35, 50 ವರ್ಷದ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಗುರುವಿಂದ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಬಂತು. ಆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಬಂದಾಗ ಈ ಪುಸ್ತಕವನ್ನು ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. 10 gunas that you should have to this. So I would commend that we read this book. But remember always, your inheritance of a great civilization, all of us have to find a way. And these gunas and this book is a guide for you. But at the end of the day, you have to find your own way, look at your gurus. Why do we need a guru? Why do we need this book? Because it makes it easier for us to learn. For us to learn on our own, do things is difficult. With a guru shows us the path. But using the guru and everything else, we have to find our own path. And the true happiness and realization lies in the fact that we know where we go one day, and that is to seek moksha. And once you understand the purpose of life, you get happiness, you get equanimity, and you are contented, and you understand and live happily, and stress comes down. To me, that is the message I get from his book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohandas ji. I would now request Srimati Shefali ji to kindly, have a few words.
Everyone, namaskara. I was a little intrigued because why me? I am just a beginner. I'm still taking my baby steps on this path to dharma. So why me for a book like this? But then I came to Bangalore. I read this book. And this morning I had an interaction with Professor Mukund, and I realized that like all things, there is a divine design even in this. Because as I was reading this book, I was realizing that many of the 10 attributes or the 10 gunas that he's speaking about, I have seen this being practiced by the people that I meet as I travel across the length and breadth of this country. They might not know what it is called. They might not know that what they are practicing is jnana or vairagya or medha or bhakti, but they are doing it because that is their understanding of dharma. That is what they think dharma is. And I began on my own journey of understanding what is dharma was when I was trying to go back to my own history. I am a Konkani from Goa. And like everyone else, like every person in Goa, even my life has been impacted by the 450-year-old Portuguese rule and by the kind of Holocaust and by the kind of persecution that the Portuguese did to the Hindus of Goa. So there were people who left Goa and came to Karnataka, came all the way to Kerala. Mohandas Pai belongs to one of that family. My family moved from their ancestral village and moved to another village in Goa, which was at that point of time under the Maratha rule. But what intrigued me was, as I started reading more and more about the kind of things that the Portuguese and the Jesuits did to the Hindus, telling them that if you convert, you will get everything. You will get property, you will get fame, you will get jobs, you will get everything. And if you don't convert, then you have to leave or you will be tortured. And there were unspeakable tortures under the name of Goan Inquisition. But what intrigued me was, despite over 150 years of this constant, terrible torture, majority of the Goans remained Hindu. Without even realizing, they probably hadn't read the Sanskrit scriptures, but they were practicing dharma. So what is it about our dharma that makes people hold on to it despite so many pressures for them to convert? Is something that it just blew my mind away. And I started reading more about dharma. I started trying to understand what is it, what is the timelessness of the philosophy that we have, of the faith that we have that makes people want to hold on to it. And I realized that when I went to Peru a couple of years ago, Peru also had their own culture, their own religion. There were Incas in Peru. But it took the Spanish just 52 years to entirely turn that country Catholic. They used the same tactics that the Portuguese used in Goa. But Goans endured it for 452 years. They made compromises with the then Portuguese rule, but they did not change their dharma. They did not give up on their identity. And that, I think, is a tremendous achievement. So what is it that we have? What is it about our dharma that makes us hold on to it even when the whole world is against us? That is a question that prompted me to read our scriptures, to meet people, to talk to them about what is it about us. And I got the answers in my travels across India. And when I read this book now, I can sort of relate it back to those experiences. And then I realized that these are the 10 gunas that Professor Mukund describes. Because I'm a storyteller, I'm going to tell you just a couple of incidents, so just bear with me. Once I was traveling in Madhya Pradesh in peak summer, and there was one ancient temple there, Gurjar Pratihara temple, that I wanted to see, which was far away from everything. And it was very hot. It was probably 44, 45 degrees. I was already sick, but I really wanted to see the temple. And the temple was far away from the road. So I had to walk for almost 2 kilometers to go there and come back. And it was almost 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was exhausted. I already had fever. But somehow, just by willpower alone, I went to the temple. And the temple was like many temples in North India, like most temples in North India. It was vandalized and desecrated by Islamic invaders. And because I was probably not feeling well, it was afternoon, it was hot, I just felt very desolate, because it was just me at the temple, and there were murtis broken, noses broken, breasts hacked, the temple shikhara destroyed, and the temple, the shell of the temple just stood there, and inside the garbhagriha there was nothing, no murti, nothing. And I think that was one of the lowest points emotionally for me, because I just sat there near the temple and I cried and cried and cried for almost 20 minutes. And then I had to walk back. I was really exhausted, and mentally, physically, everything. And then when I was passing, going towards a road, I was walking through the fields, my feet were muddy. And there was this really small house that I had passed on my way to the temple also, but I did not stop. And by this time I was really exhausted. I had no water, so I just waited near the house. Outside the house there was a neem tree, and there was that wired khatia which you have in North Indian houses. So I just sat there for some time, and suddenly the door opened and a lady came from that house. And she took a look at me and she realized that I was not feeling well. So she said, "Didi, kya ho gaya?" I said, "Thoda pani mil sakta hai." So she got me water, and then she looked one look at me and said, "Aapne kuch khaya?" It was around 2:30 in the afternoon. So I didn't want to trouble her. So I told her, "It's okay, I'll go and I'll eat." She said, "No, you wait." And she went inside, and by the time she had finished her lunch and everything, her kitchen was closed. She was probably sleeping when I had reached her house. But she went inside, she made a roti, and she had some dal, and she offered it to me, and she offered me some good and water. So I had that, and I started feeling better. And then I felt like, I was troubling her so much that when it was time to leave, I made the mistake of offering her some money. So she just recoiled. I can still remember this in front of my mind's eye. It was revulsion. It's like, how can you offer me money for something like this, which is very natural to me? So then I said, I didn't know what to say. So she said, how can I take money from you? She said it in Hindi. She said, हम तो गिरस्थ हैं, पांथस्थ को पानी देना हमारा धर्म है. She didn't know that, and it is true, it is the duty of the grihastha to support all the 3 other ashramas. It is the duty of the grihastha to feed any traveler that comes to your house. It is written in the Shastras. But here was a woman who probably had gone to school, maybe, I don't know, 7th standard, 8th standard. But she knew what she had to do. She said, we are grihasthas, and it is our job to offer the panthastha water. And when I read Professor Mukund's book, and there is a chapter on it on vairagya that talks about detached attachment, and I could relate to it, and I could see that what kind of bigness of heart and what kind of deep commitment to dharma you must have to practice it in your everyday life. You may not attend lectures, you may not give lectures, but you actually live the dharma, and dharma is alive in this country in every house, in some way or the other. In S.L. Bhairappa's book Sartha, in the end, there is a very poignant conversation where the hero of the book, he meets the guru of his wife, and by the time there is devastation all around. The temple in Mulastana has been destroyed. His girlfriend, the heroine, has been raped, and she's pregnant from that rape, and he is taking her to safety. And he meets her guru, a great yogacharya, who is about to give up his life. And that guru asks him, is there anything you want to ask me? And he has only one question in his mind. He doesn't vocalize it, but the guru realizes it antadhyana, and he says, I know what you want to ask. You're asking, when will this destruction stop? So guru says, the destruction will not stop. There will be destruction of the scale that you cannot even comprehend. Destruction of your temples, of your murtis, of your way of life, of your scriptures, everything. But there will also be the urge to create. There will be also the urge to rebuild. There will also be the urge to hold on to your dharma and make sure that it does not die. And that is why we are Sanatana. When these days we are all slaves of our possessions. There is a Kannada saying, actually, I don't know if I'm saying it correct or not, but I'll try. It says that uppu hakkidare tuppa beka emba ase. A very poor man who doesn't even have salt, his only desire is at first just to have some salt, because he doesn't have anything. But once he gets some salt, once uppu hakkidare, he says, I want some soppu to go with it, some vegetables. Once he gets soppu hakkidare, tuppa bekka emba ase. Once he gets the soppu, he wants a little bit of tuppa, because that will make the sabzi taste nicer. Once he gets that also, where to keep it in? So he says, tuppa hakkidare, koppa bekku emba ase. So our desires never cease. That is why we need that vairagya, that sense, that feeling of detached attachment, which is there in all our homes, by the way. Every single time somebody does rangoli in front of our homes, what are they practicing? They're practicing detached attachment. They are spending a lot of time in creating something incredibly beautiful, something incredibly complex. And they know that the minute they have finished doing that rangoli, next moment somebody can come and destroy it. Somebody can just step over it, it will be destroyed. And by next morning, they still have the energy to sweep it all away and do the rangoli again. That is what our dharma teaches us. And every day, by doing that, that is the lesson we are supposed to learn, that lesson of detached attachment. This book talks a lot about all these gunas, and what I liked most about the book is that Professor Mukund has related it with his own life experiences, so it makes it relatable and it makes those lessons very memorable. Particularly, there is one part which I found very moving, where he says that he was in the US and a janitor was cleaning the floor and the floor was still wet. And the person said, "You can walk." And he said, "No, I'll wait till it dries. Because I've also worked as a janitor and I know how it feels that when the floor is wet and if somebody walks over it." We don't realize it, right? Because it is somebody else's work. We don't do it deliberately to hurt that person or whatever, but most of the time we don't put ourselves into the other person's shoes. But that is also what Dharma teaches us. That you need to also put yourself into the other person's shoes. That is why this book is a practical manual of success of the gunas that we need in order to make an impact in life.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಮುಕುಂದ್ರು ಅವರನ್ನು ಅಕ್ಷಯ್ ನಾನು ನಮಗೆ ಪರಿಚಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದವರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ನಾವು ಪ್ರೀತಿಯಿಂದ ಗೌರವದಿಂದ ಗುರುಗಳು ಅಂತಲೇ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಮುಕುಂದ್ರ ಗುರುಗಳ ಪಾದಾರವಿಂದಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಸ್ಕರಿಸಿ, ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಅವಕಾಶ. ಮೋಹನ್ದಾಸ್ ಪೈ, ಶೆಫಾಲಿ ವೈದ್ಯ ಇವ್ರುಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಟ್ವಿಟ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ, ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರ ಲೆಕ್ಚರ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಟಾಕ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಕೇಳ್ತಿದ್ವಿ. ಇವತ್ತು ಅವರಿಬ್ಬರೂ ಲೈವ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡುವಂಥದ್ದಿದೆ. ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೋಹನ್ದಾಸ್ ಪೈ ಅವರಂತೂ ನಮ್ಮೂರಿನವರೇ, ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಅವ್ರಿಗೇನು ವಿಶೇಷವಾದ ಆಹ್ವಾನ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೆ ಶೆಫಾಲಿ ದೀದಿ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಕಮ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ವೇ and she is in Bengaluru, which happens to be one of our most favorite cities. On behalf of people of Bengaluru, Didi, I welcome you once again, and you are always one among us. I want to contextualize this book and what I make of it, its impact, its importance in two dimensions. The first dimension is about the very personal lessons the book or the roadmap the book can offers to all of us to lead our lives and go about the challenges of everyday life. How to lead a happy and successful life is a question that has troubled all civilizations and all thinkers ever since the you go back times immemorial. These are the philosophical questions, existential questions that has troubled philosophers, thinkers and humankind at large across time and space. It's you read the ancient philosophies of Greece or you from Egypt or the Babylonia, you will find that attempts have been made to answer these questions. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ 5,000-8,000 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಈ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಉತ್ತರ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥ ಬಹಳ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಗಳು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆದಿವೆ. How do we define what is a successful life? It is so difficult to define it. Can we say that being a successful CEO of a Fortune 500 company is what defines success? That means that all those millions and millions of people who would not be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, all of them are unsuccessful. Can we say that becoming the Prime Minister of a nation is the definition of success? Well, after all, only one person can be Prime Minister. Does that mean the rest of the humanity, all of them are leading unsuccessful and worthless lives? So questions of this kind have always troubled and the thinkers of this land. Attempts also therefore were made to understand what a wholesome, holistic life can be. The Sanatana Dharma thinkers therefore came up with very practical, realist solutions. ನಾಲ್ಕು ಆಶ್ರಮಗಳು to divide the way we approach life. ಬ್ರಹ್ಮಚರ್ಯ, ಗೃಹಸ್ಥ, ವಾನಪ್ರಸ್ಥ ಮತ್ತು ಸನ್ಯಾಸ. ನಾಲ್ಕು ಗುಣಗಳು, ನಾಲ್ಕು ಆಶ್ರಮಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಧರ್ಮ, ಅರ್ಥ, ಕಾಮ, ಮೋಕ್ಷದ ಚತುರ್ವಿಧ ಫಲಪುರುಷಾರ್ಥಗಳು. All of these in some ways gave an indication of how we can mold our own lives. And this book, by exploring all of these 10 gunas, offers a very practical guide of how we can navigate the everyday challenges of life that all of us are bound to encounter. No single person is insulated from the challenges of everyday life. And life in many times is a paradox. One very interesting example that Professor gives here, something that I myself was encountering a few days ago, which many of you also would have kind of encountered in your own lives, is something that Didi referred to during her intervention. This whole concept of detachment or vairagya, it is a very difficult to practice concept. I wanted to get a puppy recently. So I got a puppy. So you are attached to the puppy. But then along with the attachment also comes the burden of responsibility of taking care of the puppy. But our human tendency wants the joy of attachment, but does not want the bondage of responsibility or attachment, or the responsibility of taking care of the attachment. This is something that all of us encounter every day. So here he asks this very interesting question. Every attachment seems wonderful when we are unattached, while freedom seems wonderful when we are attached. The eternal question is how to enjoy the pleasures of attachment and yet experience the bliss of freedom. Who doesn't want an answer to this? In that context, this book is very interesting and will serve a very important purpose, because every single being, every sentient being has this natural urge to think on these questions. Many a times I wonder, many of you have know me personally, na mane hatra ella bandirtiri, all of you have in fact met this person who I want to give an example of. Sir, sometimes in the mornings, my mornings are extremely hectic. There are people in the morning, phone calls to attend, scheduling the whole day. And sometimes I miss breakfast, and that also kind of causes me to go hangry. And so I'm getting inside the car and just about to leave. In front of my house, almost every other day, is a karyakarta of the party. His name is Vijay, who is he drives auto rickshaw here in this part of the city. Dirt poor. He also has some mental and a few physical challenges also. I have never in my entire life seen Vijay unhappy. He is always happy. He is always laughing and smiling. And sometimes when I sit in the car, I see him and I wonder, oh God, with all of these blessings I am cribbing about my life, look at him, he's so happy. You may have encountered such similar Vijays in your lives also. So, but for somebody who is seeing this from outside, I am this young dynamic MP with fame, this, that, everything, car, the sirens. And then he is seen from the perspective of a society as a not so successful person, quote unquote unsuccessful. But he is somebody who I see every day, and I see, man, I want to have that genuine sense of smile, the genuine happiness that he has. So this whole sense of how to be happy, how to be successful is a quest that all of us as individual human beings have to make this journey. And in that sense, this book is a very important contribution. Mohandas ji made a very interesting point about wealth, prosperity, of how India was an abundant nation, never was a civilization which glorified poverty. The great thing about this civilization is there was never a distinction or a divorce between science and spirituality, between material pursuits of joy and the spiritual pursuits of human existence. Both of these were an integral part of human life. Therefore, both of these, all these pursuits were seen in an integral and a wholesome manner. Therefore, this book, by inculcating, imbibing these 10 gunas in our life, we will be able to achieve happiness, bliss, and success in both ihaloka as well as paraloka. In that sense, this book is a very important contribution, and I want to thank on behalf of all of you, Professor, for making the effort and the tapasya that was required to write this book. In brief, I want to say why the second dimension of this book is very important. Yesterday, I came back from a long travel, and I had breakfast at Balal's, a very prominent breakfast joint. And I generally like to talk to people who are there, next to the table, etc. There was this very young family who were eating next to our table. A very young girl, I think, I started talking to her. I think she was in 8th or 9th grade, studying in a very prominent international school here. Needless to say, of course, she didn't know Kannada. Her parents, of course, were encouraging her to speak, English with me, and she, because she happened to be studying in an international school, she also had an American accent. When her, of course, her parents knew who I was, and naturally she didn't know who I was. And then when her parents introduced who I was, then she very candidly said that, to be very honest with you, I don't like your party. And I said, no surprises there. Tell me why. Then she, of course, gave the very, answers which all of you can kind of assume as to why, etc. And then I wanted to know more about where she was coming from. And she went into a 5-minute rant about how our history textbooks have only given a glorification or a hagiography of India and has not spoken about the ills of our past. And when I asked her as to what are the ills of the past, then she started going into a completely different dimension, and well, it started making me ask a lot of questions as to what we have made our young people read. What have we made of them? And then I had this very interesting quote that I came by just yesterday. A very interesting quote that perhaps will resonate with all of us. Because the girl is kind of a product of what this quote says. The very famous Czech thinker Milan Kundera once remarked, the first step in liquidating a people is to erase the people's memory, destroy its books, its culture, and its history. Then have somebody else write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. This is exactly what we have done. So, if you look at who actually is preserving dharma today, Didi mentioned about this very touching incident. If you just go out and see, the ones who are most educated, you will find them the most distanced from our roots. ಕನ್ವರಿಯ ಯಾತ್ರೆ ಮಾಡೋದು ಯಾರು? ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಧರ್ಮಸ್ಥಳಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಿಂದ ಉತ್ತರ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಿಂದ ಬಿಸಿಲಲ್ಲಿ ನಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಪಾದಯಾತ್ರೆ ಬರೋದು ಯಾರು? ನಾಟ್ ದಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ ಎಜುಕೇಟೆಡ್ ಪೀಪಲ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಇನ್ ದ ಪೀಕ್ ಆಫ್ ಸಮ್ಮರ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ವಾಕ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ವೇ ಟು ಉಜ್ಜಯಿನಿ. Who are these people who do this? If you actually see the temples of Tirupati, Vishwanatha, wherever you go, who are the people who stand in queues for days together? Who say, no, we will not take the helicopter darshan, or we will not take the 10,000 rupee break darshan, but we will go by walk. The poorest of the poor, the most uneducated, quote unquote unwashed masses, they are the ones who are actually practicing dharma. Why these books are necessary, and why these books are necessary in English language, despite its inherent limitations to put across the Indic way of life and thoughts in English, is because today we are facing a very big challenge of losing the young of India who are exposed to modern English education in a great measure than what the challenges of the past. In that sense, to communicate the greatness of this civilization to the young of today in the language that they can understand, so that they can come out of this colonizer's trap and go on a journey of finding themselves, this book is a very important attempt at that civilizational context as well. For both these things, both the personal as well as the civilizational dimension, I think this is a very important book. Thank you, Professor. Sorry I've taken a lot of time.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. To be honest, I'm so excited at this point, because even though it's the fag end of the event, the fact that I'm excited is because I'm just sharing a feeling on behalf of Gurugalu Shishya Varga. We are excited for a wonderful long journey that we oversee, starting from now, from this book to a number of more books. I'm very confident that this will lead to a cultural and spiritual revolution in this country. I'm not just telling this because he is my guru. I have experienced it in my own life. At the outset, I thank Tejasvi Surya ji, Shefali Vaidya ji, and Mohandas Pai sir for making time and being part of this very special occasion. Thank you, sir.